I spent 27 years believing I was the mistake everyone whispered about behind closed doors. My mother's disappointment hung in the air like stale cigarette smoke every time I walked into a room. My father stopped making eye contact with me when I was 19, right after I told them who I really was. The thing is, when enough people treat you like something broken, you start to believe them. You start walking through life with your shoulders hunched, making yourself smaller, quieter, less visible. That was me until the day Marcus walked into the coffee shop where I worked and called me remarkable. But I'm getting ahead of myself. It started on a Tuesday morning in late September. The kind of morning where the air has that first real bite of autumn, and you can see your breath fog up when you step outside. I'd been working the opening shift at Cornerstone Cafe for about 3 months. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I'd moved to Portland 6 months earlier with nothing but 2 suitcases and a desperate need to disappear from my hometown in rural Ohio, where being gay meant being the subject of pitying looks in church prayer circles. I was wiping down the espresso machine when he walked in. Tall, maybe 6'2", with deep brown skin and these impossibly kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. He wore a charcoal gray sweater that looked expensive but lived in, and he carried a leather messenger bag that had seen some miles. What struck me immediately wasn't his looks, though he was undeniably handsome. It was the way he moved through space, like he belonged wherever he was, like the world had made room for him, and he accepted that as natural. I was the opposite. I'd spent my whole life apologizing for taking up space. "Good morning," he said, and his voice was warm, textured, the kind of voice that made you want to keep listening. "What do you recommend for someone who desperately needs caffeine but is trying to pretend they have sophisticated taste?" I surprised myself by smiling. Genuine customer interactions weren't my strong suit. I usually just took orders and tried to be invisible. "The cortado," I said. "It's small enough that you feel sophisticated, but it's basically just espresso and steamed milk, so you get the caffeine hit without the pretension." He laughed, and something in my chest loosened. Sold. I like someone who can see through my bullshit before I've even properly deployed it. I made his drink, hyper-aware of my hands, of the possibility of messing up under observation. But muscle memory took over, and I created what was honestly one of my better cortados. When I handed it to him, our fingers brushed for just a second. I pulled back like I'd been burned. "I'm Marcus," he said. "I just moved into the neighborhood. Something tells me I'm going to become a regular." "I'm Elijah," I managed. "Welcome to the neighborhood." He stayed for 2 hours that first day, working on a laptop in the corner. Every so often I'd glance over and catch him looking at me. Not staring, just looking, like I was something worth observing. It made me nervous and exhilarated in equal measure. He came back the next day, and the day after that. By the end of the week, I had his order ready before he reached the counter. Cortado, extra foam, in a ceramic cup because he said coffee tasted better when you weren't drinking it from paper. "You're good at this," he said one morning, gesturing at the cafe, at me, at the space between us. "At making coffee?" I asked. "At paying attention," he corrected, "at noticing what people need." I didn't know what to say to that. In my family, paying attention to what people needed meant learning to anticipate my mother's moods, reading my father's silences, making myself useful enough to justify my existence. It had never been framed as a skill before, just survival. Marcus started staying longer. We'd talk during slow periods. I learned he was a social worker, specialized in LGBTQ youth services. He'd moved to Portland from Chicago because he needed a fresh start after a bad breakup. He was 34, 7 years older than me. He loved old movies, terrible puns, and cooking elaborate meals for one. "What about you?" he asked one afternoon when the cafe was nearly empty. "What's your story, Elijah?" I shrugged, wiping down a table I'd already wiped twice. "Not much to tell. Small-town kid trying to figure out the big city." "I don't believe that for a second," he said softly. "Everyone has a story. Yours is just one you're not ready to tell yet." He was right, of course. I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to tell him about the night my father told me I was no longer welcome at family gatherings. I wasn't ready to explain how my mother cried like I'd died, like the son she'd raised had been replaced by this stranger she couldn't understand. I wasn't ready to admit that I'd spent 2 years after coming out sleeping on friends' couches, working dead-end jobs, convinced that this was all I deserved. But Marcus was patient. He kept coming back, kept talking to me like I was someone worth knowing. It was mid-October when things shifted. I was closing up one evening when I realized I'd forgotten to order more oat milk. My manager was going to kill me. I was standing in the storage room, staring at the empty shelf, feeling that familiar wave of inadequacy wash over me. I was spiraling, thinking about how I couldn't even handle basic inventory, how I was going to get fired, how I'd end up back in Ohio, back to being nothing. Elijah, Marcus's voice cut through my thoughts. I hadn't realized he was still there. You okay? I'm fine, I said automatically. Just forgot to order something. It's stupid. Hey. He stepped into the storage room, and suddenly the space felt very small. It's not stupid if it's upsetting you. And then I did something I never did. I told the truth. I just feel like I can't do anything right, I said, and my voice cracked. Like no matter how hard I try, I'm always going to be the person who forgets the oat milk, who disappoints people, who isn't enough. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Who told you that you weren't enough?" The question broke something in me. I felt tears burning behind my eyes. Everyone, my parents, my hometown, the church youth group leader who told me I was choosing sin, the kids at school who called me slurs. Take your pick. They were wrong, Marcus said simply. Every single one of them was wrong. I laughed bitterly. You don't know me well enough to say that. I know you well enough to see that you show up every day to a job that doesn't pay you what you're worth. I know you remember how every regular customer takes their coffee. I know you recommended that elderly woman switch to decaf because you noticed she was getting jittery, and you did it so kindly that she thanked you. I know you apologize for taking up space, and that breaks my heart because you deserve to take up so much space, Elijah. I was crying now, properly crying, and I was mortified. But Marcus just pulled me into a hug, and I let him. I let myself be held. His sweater smelled like cedar and something warm I couldn't name. Couldn't. He didn't tell me to stop crying. He didn't tell me it would be okay. He just held me while I shook apart. When I finally pulled back embarrassed, he smiled at me. You want to get out of here? Get some real food. My treat. We went to a Thai place around the corner. Over pad Thai and spring rolls, I told him everything. About Ohio, about my family, about the 2 years of couch surfing and the loneliness that felt like it was going to swallow me whole. About moving to Portland with this desperate hope that maybe here I could be someone different. Marcus listened to all of it. Then he told me his story. About growing up in a religious family on the south side of Chicago. About coming out at 16 and being sent to conversion therapy. About the years of therapy after that to undo the damage. About building a life for himself that his family still didn't understand, but that he'd learned to be proud of anyway. You're not a mistake, he said, looking directly into my eyes. You're not broken. You're someone who survived things that would have destroyed a lot of people, and you're still standing. That's not weakness, Elijah. That's strength. I wanted to believe him so badly it physically hurt. We started spending time together outside the cafe. Marcus would text me on my days off, asking if I wanted to go to a movie or check out a bookstore or just walk around the city. It felt like friendship, but there was something else underneath, a current I was afraid to name. I was falling for him. Slowly, then all at once. The problem was, I didn't trust it. I didn't trust that someone like Marcus, someone who seemed to have his life together, who was kind and successful and comfortable in his own skin, would want someone like me. Someone who was still figuring out how to exist in the world without apologizing for it. One night in early November, Marcus invited me to his apartment for dinner. He lived in a beautiful one-bedroom in the Pearl District, with exposed brick walls and floor-to-ceiling windows. It was the kind of place I'd never imagined being able to afford. He cooked pasta from scratch, and we drank red wine, and he put on a Billie Holiday record. It felt domestic and intimate and terrifying. Can I tell you something? Marcus said as we were cleaning up. We were standing at his kitchen sink, shoulders almost touching. Sure, I said, my heart hammering. I think you're remarkable, he said quietly. I've thought so since the first day I walked into that cafe. The way you move through the world, trying so hard to be invisible. But you're not. You're luminous, Elijah. You're this bright, beautiful thing that people tried to dim, but they couldn't. You're still here, still shining. I couldn't breathe. Marcus, I don't know how to do this. Do what? This, whatever this is. I don't know how to let someone see me and not run away. He turned to face me fully. Then don't run. Stay. Let me see you. Let me prove to you that you're not what they said you were. What if I disappoint you? I whispered. What if you don't? He whispered back, and then he kissed me. Soft and careful and asking permission with every movement. I kissed him back, and it felt like coming home to a place I'd never been before. That night changed everything. We started dating, really dating. Marcus was patient with my fears, with the way I'd sometimes pull back when things felt too good, too real. He'd gently call me out when I was self-sabotaging, but he never made me feel guilty for it. Healing isn't linear, he'd say. You're allowed to have bad days, you're allowed to be scared. But he also pushed me, gently, to take up more space. He encouraged me to apply for a management position at the cafe. He came to the open mic night when I finally worked up the courage to read some of my poetry. He introduced me to his friends as his boyfriend, with this pride in his voice that made me feel like I was something precious. The hardest moment came in December. My mother called. It was the first time I'd heard from her in over a year. She wanted to know if I was coming home for Christmas. I don't think that's a good idea, I said, my voice shaking. Elijah, you're still our son, she said, but her voice was tight, conditional. Am I? Because last time I was there, Dad made it pretty clear I wasn't welcome. There was a long silence. He's trying, she finally said. We're trying. Trying to what? Trying to accept me or trying to change me? Another silence. That was my answer. I'm building a life here, Mom. A good life, with people who love me as I am. You mean with that man? Her voice went cold. His name is Marcus, and yes, with him. He's kind and brilliant, and he makes me feel like I matter. He calls me remarkable, Mom. When's the last time you called me anything but a disappointment? I heard her sharp intake of breath. That's not fair. Isn't it? You cried when I came out like I died. You let Dad throw me out. You chose your comfort over your son. We were trying to save you, she said, and she was crying now. From what? From being happy? From being loved? I don't need saving, Mom. I needed parents who could love me without conditions. I needed you to fight for me. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. Neither do I said. But I'm learning. I'm learning that I deserve people who show up for me, who celebrate me, who don't make me feel like I have to earn the right to exist. I hung up. I was shaking, crying, but I also felt lighter than I had in years. Marcus held me that night. I'm proud of you, he said. I know that was hard. I keep waiting to feel guilty, I admitted, but I just feel free. That's because you chose yourself, he said, for maybe the first time in your life. You chose yourself. On Christmas Eve, Marcus took me to see the lights at the grotto. It was freezing and my nose was running, and I was wearing this ridiculous knit hat Marcus's friend had made. We were standing there, looking at thousands of lights reflecting off the trees when he turned to me. I love you, he said. I know it's fast and I know you're still figuring things out, but I love you. You're not a mistake, Elijah. You're my miracle. You're the person who reminded me why I do the work I do, why I believe in the resilience of the human spirit. You survived everything they threw at you, and you're still capable of softness, of joy, of love. That's extraordinary. I was crying again, but this time it was different. These weren't tears of shame or fear. These were tears of relief, of recognition, of finally being seen. I love you too, I said. You make me feel like I'm allowed to exist. You are allowed to exist, he said fiercely. You're allowed to take up space and be loud and be proud and be exactly who you are. And I'm going to remind you of that every single day until you believe it. It's been 8 months since that night. I'm still working at the cafe, but I got promoted to assistant manager. I'm writing more poetry. I joined a queer men's support group that Marcus recommended. I'm in therapy, working through the years of damage, learning to rewrite the stories I tell myself about who I am. Marcus and I moved in together last month. His apartment became our apartment. I have plants now. which is ridiculous because I've never kept anything alive. But Marcus says that's the point. We're learning to nurture things together. I still have hard days, days when the old voices creep back in, telling me I'm not enough, that I'm too much, that I'm the mistake everyone whispered about. But now I have Marcus's voice too, steady and sure, reminding me that I'm remarkable, that I'm loved, that I deserve to be here. Yesterday we were cooking dinner together. I burned the garlic bread, and instead of spiraling into self-criticism, I just laughed. Marcus looked at me with this expression of pure joy and said, "There you are. There's the Elijah who knows he's allowed to make mistakes without it meaning anything about his worth." I kissed him then, surrounded by the smell of burned bread and the life we're building together. A life where I'm not the mistake, where I'm not the disappointment, where I'm just Elijah, learning to take up space, learning to be loved, learning that maybe the people who whispered about me were wrong all along. I'm not a mistake. I'm a miracle. And for the first time in my life, I'm starting to believe it.